Dempsey's garage. Oh, yes, Mrs. O'Neill.
Mrs. Walter O'Neill?
Yes, ma'am. Well, it was a rush job anyway, and I'm rushed enough as it is. Don't mention it. Glad to be of service, Mrs. O'Neill. You can add this to your report. Miss O'Neill don't like this guy to go. Not yet.
All right, Dempsey, thanks.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Do you know which transformational sectors will create the next, not billionaires, but trillionaires? Those that dominate sustainability, perpetual clean energy, longevity, quantum computing, space, and autonomy. Astor Perkins quarterly events showcases these must-see startups, deep tech experts, and the investors backing them. If you haven't already, sign up now before you miss your chance to participate in the trillion-dollar economy. So with that, I've been joined by Shruthi Rao, who is the co-founder and chief business officer of Vendia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Wow, what an illustrious career you've had. You've started at McKinsey, and since then you have been involved in strategy and business development roles at AT&T, DirecTV, Bank of America, AWS, and others. And then you're even involved in a number of blockchain initiatives, as well as even starting a crypto mining shop out of India, I guess, at some point. So tell us about this journey, and what would you like to share about your career so far?
Definitely. I'm what they call an engineer gone rogue and gone to the dark side, and got my MBA and decided that love for technology, love for business, I started becoming this pendulum who went back and forth. So career started off with McKinsey and consulting, and after a little bit of a rock and roll lifestyle there, I went into corp dev and new business development did the AT&T, Singular, and DirecTV merger, went to Bank of America, did the countrywide Merrill Lynch, Bank of America merger. Everyone remembers that from about a decade ago. But when I ran that division there, what I saw was there's this big reason why after mergers, a lot of companies fail to become one company. It's 3 companies put together, it never becomes one. Why is that? Especially we talk about culture, it's 3 different companies coming together. But what we fail to talk about is the 3 different companies that are now one don't share any data with each other. Their infrastructures are not set up that way. The people are not set up that way. Processes definitely not set up that way. So that got me fascinated about data. And at that point, the only one who was doing data right was cloud service providers. So I decided I'm going to go to AWS and see what they know and I don't know and learn from them. And went to AWS and ran the serverless business with Tim Wagner, my co-founder. He actually interviewed me into AWS, and then started the blockchain category for AWS and launched Amazon Managed Blockchain and Quantum Ledger Database. But crypto, that was an interesting one. When I was at Bank of America, someone told me about Bitcoin, and I thought, geez, $7 for online money, that's way too much. I mean, I know how much Bitcoin is now. It's pretty interesting. So I started mining it at home with ASIC servers from Micro Centers in Los Angeles, and quickly ran out of space in my guest bedroom. So I took over my parents' farmhouse in a rural part of India, in southern India, and recruited farmers to put in ASIC servers from Shenzhen, crashed the grid. Cops came to the farm, and thought I was making meth at home. I was not making meth. I was running ASIC servers. So that's a little bit of a notoriety. This is circa 2011. So I had a lot of fun. My servers are all gone, by the way. They're decrepit now.
So now we know exactly where to point the finger when it comes to the brownouts in California and some of the grid outages in India.
That was in 2011, but yes, you can blame me for that.
What an interesting career, because a lot of the events that you're talking about, many of us have kind of lived through some of those M&As, those mergers. And of course, we've seen so many studies that I think Harvard Business Review and others have kind of consolidated that shows the challenges with M&As and the net effect that we hope to gain from those rarely actually materialize. And I think part of the merger integration that oftentimes goes to the big consulting shops, we don't get to see that on the outside, but it's really at the kind of nitty-gritty granularity in terms of these details, and it's really the data layer that I think, aside from the culture and other things, really becomes highly problematic, to your point. Let's talk about your prior role at AWS. When you were at AWS, because we're talking about such scale, it's an entirely different scale, just like with Google. What did you kind of glean in terms of the importance of data and some of the challenges with dealing with massive amount of data?
Yeah, the AWS experience really single-handedly and disproportionately shaped who I am and what I do right now. Because of the scale, but not in the ways that most people think, which is when I ran the blockchain business, I met 1,092 unique customers in a 20-month period. 1,092 unique customers. That was the scale that you don't experience out of AWS. And all of them talking about the same problem. Well, what were they saying? Or why were they trying blockchain? Or why were they looking at this very complicated piece of technology? They said this, the customer said this: look, we have all of these partners that we work with. We've invested in these data making mechanisms like IoTs and mobile, digital transformation, edge, that are making more data now than ever before in the history of their existence combined. And all of this data that they're producing is getting stuck in silos. Some of these silos are within the companies. Some of these silos are with partners, and they don't have access to this data in real time or even near real time. When I say near real time, Scott, we're talking 2-3 days. They didn't even have access to this data about for a week or sometimes 2 weeks at that point. So all of the investments that the same customers had made in AI, ML, analytics, all of these data hungry solutions, they were not getting enough data. Even the big companies like Amazon.com, there's a statistic out there that they only have access to about 20% of the data they produce along with their partners. This is Amazon.com we're talking about. So other companies that are not as data savvy as Amazon have even less. So what my customers were talking about was, my data is everywhere. Some of it's within my four walls. Some of it's outside of my four walls. I need access to my data so I can do something with it. That do something could be anything. It could be track and trace. It could be inventory management. It could be three-way match, AI, ML. And all of this was not possible because they just didn't have access. So there was a plumbing problem. That single-handedly changed how I look at the world of what's important is plumbing more than anything else.
What I like about this story is that I think when a company launches itself and tries to validate its concept, they will maybe interview just a handful of enterprise customers. In this case, your population, your data size was significant. I mean, you have a nice, normal distribution type of a plot diagram because you have enough data points, and you could see clearly this pattern recognition around this plumbing aspect where there are these, I think today we see them as these kind of structural hard fences or parameters that defines, let's say, corporation boundary versus a partner boundary and so forth. But I think what you and others in the next decade are going to allow for is this notion that data can be boundaryless, containerless, and we just basically consume the data in itself without the regard for infrastructure or where it's actually housed. So that brings us to Vendia. What exactly are you guys doing?
So Vendia is short for Venn diagram. So when you think of Venn diagram, you think of two circles coming together. They're still circles. They haven't changed and become squares. They don't have to transform themselves. They don't have to add anything new. They are just who they are. They're coming together and sharing. Each of them have access and control over who they are without giving themselves up. That is really our ethos. That's how we've been guided. So we said, all of these customers, all of these companies out there who have partners, whether the partners are internal, look, there are some big companies where internal partners are just as hard to work with as external partners. We've all worked with these companies before. So we said, how can we make it easy for companies to share data both internally and externally? Not just share data in a meta sense, but also share code, but without any upfront infrastructure investment or upfront infrastructure changes. So their existing technology stack, compute storage database, their cloud preference or no cloud preference if they're on-prem, it's exactly the way it is. And they can still share data, but retain 100% control over their data, including revoke, rollback, delete, and so on and so forth. How can they do that in a CapEx-free but OpEx-only model, pay-as-you-go model? The more you use, the more expensive it gets. The less you use, you don't pay for it. So that was the thesis behind it. We are a multi-cloud, so it works wherever you are today, and distributed data platform. So you could transact with how many of our partners, internal or external, you want in a very serverless, which is pay-as-you-go, high scalability fashion with absolutely no capital expense.
When you explain it this way, it's quite intriguing, right? Because for those that are less familiar with the multi-cloud distributed data platform, they're trying to grasp what you're saying and how can actually synchronize data across multiple parties, clouds in real time without actually having to give up control. Can you explain a little bit more in terms of how that is done, and so that you can support that multi-party cross-cloud, cross-account data sharing? And maybe walk us through maybe a user journey or use case that can help illustrate what you're referring to.
You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category-leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
Absolutely. And I think we can explain this even more in a friendlier fashion with one of our favorite use cases out there. One of our customers, Best Friends Animal Society. And I'm using this particular example, especially because this is a 501c3 nonprofit. They're the largest animal welfare nonprofit in the US. And if a nonprofit can do this, big enterprises, this is very easy to do. So Best Friends Animal Society their main constituency is dogs, shelter dogs, cats, hares, bunnies, horses, all kinds of animals. They rescue and place in homes all kinds of animals in the US. They have 2,500 direct partners. The partners are dog shelters, pounds, foster care homes, veterinarians that care for these animals. Not the first set of examples you would come up with when you think of cutting edge technology, IT savvy participants. But you don't have to be very IT savvy to use this. So the main mission for Best Friends Animal Society is no kill 2025. By 2025, they want to make sure no animal is euthanized in the United States. For that, what they need to do is, once a dog comes into a shelter or coming to a shelter, they have to make sure that the inventory of other dogs and cats are balanced in that shelter. If it's overflowing, maybe place the new dog in a new shelter. If a dog gets lost and the dog is found on the street, get it back to its home in 24 hours, because the longer it takes, there's a lower propensity of that dog or cat going back home. And also the third one is make sure that the dog stays in its original home. Dogs get lost, dog's name is Spot, it becomes Sparky, and then it becomes Buzzer. And, we're talking about 3 different dogs, but it's really one dog. Why does this happen? It happens because these shelters, individual shelters, have their own localized data. They're not sharing this data with each other. They don't know what the inventory of each of these shelters is. They don't know what's the volume of inbound to outbound. So they don't have any kind of a data insights, analytics, some kind of a prediction, because they just simply don't have access to this data. What Vendia did was we created a platform for them called Pet Chain platform, where Best Friends Animal Society created this platform, invited all of those 2,500 partners to join via email. They go on, sign up. We immediately have access to all of their data. So when a dog is lost, let's say in Santa Monica in Los Angeles, the 50-mile radius, all of the partners of Best Friends Animal Society is notified that this particular dog is found, and all of them have the single view of the truth of this particular dog. Best Friends Animal Society is also making sure that they're adding some AI to this. So they take the nose print of the dog that translates it into a pet ID, just like a social security number, and you can track that dog back very easily. This whole process of setting up the infrastructure took under 2 weeks. And let me assure you, most of these 2,500 participants are not very IT savvy. Desktop PC or a cell phone is literally their IT stack. So everything runs on the background. So a volunteer worker who goes into one of these shelters, it's very easy for them to use. Their only interaction is with an app like a Facebook or any kind of an app that they can download from the iOS store. They're launching this for public in the next few months. So we encourage everyone to go to bestfriends.org and sign up and rescue a pet.
Great. Well, thank you so much for helping us to understand through that illustration, the live use case. Going a little bit deeper, just again, so all of us can have a better feel for what this is I think in kind of the more legacy, terms like data warehousing, it's this notion that you have, different environments that are out there, but you guys are creating this, the Venn diagram example, where based on the permissioning, certain types of data are coming to your environment from different sources. And then anytime there's event changes, bilateral, you guys are synchronizing to make sure that when the customer or partners are looking at the data, they're looking at your particular data mart that has all this information consolidated and synchronized. Is that correct?
So what we do is, let's just take an example here. Let's say there are 3 partners in this best friends example. There's best friends and 2 partners. One of them, for whatever reason, happens to use, since we talked about ERP, SAP there. Whoever uses SAP still does. Let's say one of the partners is using, let's say Petco or PetSmart is another partner. They use AWS, and Best Friends Animal Society uses AWS or Azure in this case. So they have 3 different stack. Now all of them have their own version of the data, and all of this data has to be synchronized. What we do is we create a plumbing in between the 3 of them, where they retain their existing infrastructure. So whoever's on Azure is still on Azure, GCP or AWS is still on the AWS, and then whoever is on SAP still runs their SAP workloads. But we make sure the plumbing orchestrates the data, so all of them see the same version of the truth. So they don't have to change what they have today. They just have to have us build the plumbing in between them, so their data is more useful and their data is more enriched.
And is the plumbing being facilitated through API hooks, or is it acting more like robotic process automation and entering in like the user?
It is all through API based. So just like when you walk up to, let's say, a database, whatever your favorite database is, let's just go with Oracle. When you go up to Oracle, you don't really need to understand how the database is made ACID or multi-primary. All you need to know is how my database table looks like. So you do create table and a table schema, so what your rows and columns should look like. And that database creates one table for you and one database for one party in one account in one cloud. So you walk up to Vendia with a schema. In our case, it's a JSON schema, and say how your data model looks like. And Vendia creates compute, storage, and database, which is the plumbing layer for you, for multiple parties in multiple accounts on multiple clouds. And with the last mile connections, We take care of all of the orchestration. Make sure whatever you have in your SAP, HANA is the same thing that you have on DynamoDB in AWS and Cosmos DB in Azure. So we take care of the orchestration layer for you.
Mm-hmm. So I think on the technical plumbing aspects, I think you guys have a good handle. But do you find that sometimes the bottleneck is actually getting the cooperation or the participation from the likes of the data administrator on the side of SAP or Azure or whatever the systems may be?
So what is interesting here is there is never a situation where we go in and sell to all of the parties. When I say sell, not just economic selling or even influential selling, to all parties within that particular network. In Best Friends Animal Society's case, we sold our services to Best Friends Animal Society. They built this application called Pitching, which has a UI, and they invite the participants via email. So for the participants, it's as easy to use as an app. That's the way we've seen it works the most. There is always a leader-follower motion in most of our sales, and the leader is the economic buyer, and they either peanut butter it or absorb the cost and so on and so forth. So we don't hear much resistance from any of the partners there.
Understood. Let's talk about a little bit around forecasting and also simulations and modeling. So when we talk about, let's say, for example, demand planning, supply chain planning, oftentimes they're highly complex. You're dealing with multivariate, types of a function that's really difficult. And of course, trying to get a representation of how it's actually going to play out in reality is very difficult to do. How are you able to facilitate this, and where is the actual simulation and the modeling occurring in your environments, in the respective different environments, and then you pulling the results out? I'm just trying to understand kind of the load and the functions.
Don't forget to visit astorperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars; Damian Vaughn, former NFL player; Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astorperkins.com and click on Events.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I'll use another example. This is near and dear to my heart as well. This is about berries. There is a berry exporter, berry company that really sells berries all over the world. They're from South America, and their most important cost center are mushy berries. So berries go from harvesting centers to distribution centers. They sit in the truck. The truck gets warm, especially if it's hot out, and it sits in the truck to warm. It goes from berry to berry jam. And berry jam only gets 10% of the total value of plum berries. So they're very interested in making sure they don't go bad. Now, how do they do this? They started off with let's install some cold chain sensors in there, get the temperature reading. We have LoJack, we'll get geolocation sensors in there. All's great. But now, how do you penalize or incentivize the drivers of these trucks to take a certain route based on what AI or some kind of a model is saying? Now, we don't model ourselves, but what we do is, this is how the flow looks like. The driver has picked up berries from one of the warehouses, taking it to the distribution center. We capture the cold chain sensor temperature readings. We capture the geolocation reading, the speed of the truck, the traffic pattern, the weather pattern, things like that. Anything that was an API feed. Now, all of this is decided by the customer, by the way. We just get the API feed from there. We get all of that. And then in this particular case, Amazon Forecast runs on top of the data that we've collected, and then says, driver should take route 2, not route 1. So we take that, we send that text message back to the driver saying, your recommendation is you take route 2, not route 1. And he says, great, yes. And he acknowledges it. But let's say he takes route 1. And for whatever reasons, the berries go mushy. Now you have a lineage of all of the actions taken by this particular company and by the driver, the recommendations made, the recommendations ignored. And now you know where to assign that particular cost, should the berries go mushy. So this is one of the use cases, and this company has tens of thousands of drivers worldwide, and they are able to very quickly scale this operation out to, right now about 40% of the drivers in their portfolio are using this.
Well, we know who to thank when those barriers come back to us in a fresh form. So thank you for that. Here's an interesting question, which is probably not, but I think, do you foresee that you guys are in effect a Trojan horse that could take away business from the other cloud providers, where why deal with at some point you're going to hold all this data anyway, so why not just work directly with you guys only to a great extent and start to cut off some of the other peripheral players?
Well, I'll say this, that we are entirely also based on cloud. So when we are multi-cloud, let's say there are 3 companies, one on Azure, one on GCP, one on AWS. We're still building cloud services. So cloud services are still benefiting from what we do. We're just making their higher level services, like the AI MLs, their storage, more performant, more useful, more ROI for their customers. Agreed. Rather than buy more and more of things. So
agreed. I think that's right. I think that's right.
Better together story for sure.
Yeah, I think that is a good story. My last question for you is lessons learned in terms of product or project failure, and any insights that you can share with others.
Yeah, absolutely. You said this very important thing in the beginning of N of 1,092 is a lot of customers. I think that is the most important thing here. Working backwards from the customers is so important to solve a problem. I call my previous soiree at AWS, Amazon Managed Blockchain and Quantum Ledger Database, my first failed startups, because we use technology in order to service a problem, not find a problem and then build a technology to service that. So always look at what is the real problem here, not the manifestation, but what is the problem here, and work backwards from it, and then use technology as a tool. What we do is a Lego piece in order to serve the customer problem, in order to bring that outcome to the customer. And if we don't get that, product market fit is going to be a painful journey. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a learning, thankfully, I got before I actually went and raised a round for my own startup. So I'm thankful for that.
Wonderful. So with that, I've been joined by Shruthi Rao, co-founder and chief business officer at Vendia. And for those of you listening, don't forget to sign up for Astor Perkins' upcoming quarterly event. We're featuring some of the most prominent global thought leaders, industry leaders, and deep tech startups tackling some of the greatest threats facing human survival, sustainability on Earth and in space. That's astorperkins.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.